Let's unravel Geeta's world. So you think that this is an attempt by Prime Minister Modi, if it happens, to placate the West and just maintain that equilibrium phase that it always wants to maintain.
What? You're saying the statement was
No.
away or the visit
The
itself?
visit, no, I'm saying if this visit happens to
the Ukraine visit.
Right, yeah. So,
Interesting. If the Ukraine visit happens, it might not just be to placate the West, but it could be where they're steering the conversation. If you see Americans, they have always, now they've started saying that if this is what you want to do, then play the role of a mediator.
And build on that relationship. But if our outreach to Ukraine is also predicated on the limits imposed by our relationship with Russia, how is that then strategic autonomy, Geeta?
That is what is strategic autonomy, Anna. Because if it does not serve your interests to serve a country, why would you do that?
It's been more than a year that Manipur has been burning. The civil strife has not come to a halt right now between the Kukis and the Meiteis. But looking at the domestic turmoil, you think, is the opposition right in pointing out the lapses at a time when such foreign trips are planned?
Let me flip that question around. If they were in the opposition, and if there was a strife such as this, the opposition would have questioned, why is the PM not visiting? And the PM has always visited strife-torn areas. Country has a right to ask. Country has a right to, opposition has a right to ask, and country also. People can ask their Prime Minister. He's an elected member.
Hi everyone, this is the 98th episode of Geeta's World. I'm your host Anna, and with me is Geeta Mohan. Hi Geeta, how are you?
Hi Anna.
How was your weekend?
It was quite relaxing
packed?
Actually after a long time.
Oh really?
Yes.
Nothing.
No, it's always packed. We always have work. We always have news that's coming in. But after a long time, we didn't have
actually in
an
India,
assassination attempt or a
right.
rally or a convention or a terror attack. So,
but a lot is happening within India.
yes.
There's climate change, which you feel so
strongly
passionate.
about.
Yes. It's showing. The effects are showing. So
unfortunately so, but a lot of it, Anna, cannot be blamed on just climate change. It's also about the fact that you see a crumbling infrastructure,
right,
and the government has to take onus and responsibility. Whichever government, state, center, has to take onus and responsibility. And we have seen this in other countries as well. It's not just India. There has been a massive climate change impact across the world. And it has been devastating. There have been loss of lives. But the politics of that is very different when you're seeing it in India. And when you see it in other countries. That mindset has to change.
I mean, it gets dirty.
Yes, it does.
To put it really bluntly, it gets dirty. But anyway, moving on from, because domestic politics is definitely, I think there's one question that I would actually like to ask you, but let's keep it to the very end, which involves domestic politics to a certain bit. But today we are discussing something that we often discuss in our podcast, which is the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. And days after visiting Putin in Moscow, where we saw the bonhomie actually transpiring like anything, it was criticized as well, the hug between Putin and Prime Minister Modi. But days after that, it is being speculative, it's not official yet, but Prime Minister Modi is set to visit Ukraine, Kyiv. So it will be coinciding with the Ukrainian National Day, which falls on 24th of August. But it's important to note that this will be the first time since the onset of the Russia-Ukraine war that Prime Minister Modi will be going. Not only that, it will be the first time since Ukraine's independence from the Soviet Union that any Indian Prime Minister, that's almost around 33 years.
For all the engagement that India has with Ukraine, how many students actually go and study there and study medicine of all subjects. Like Russia, Ukraine is also a hub of all these colleges that offer medicine as a course, and so a lot of students go there. So for all of that and all the engagement that we see, there has been no visit. Maybe also there wouldn't have been for some time longer had there been no war. Because the focus certainly remains for India, Russia. More than the pre-Soviet era states.
Yeah, definitely. And that is why this context is very important, because people are saying, I mean, this is the narrative that days after visiting Putin in Moscow, it's yet to happen. There are talks doing the rounds, but there's no confirmation yet. I mean, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has clarified that India, like any other government, will make its position known at the right time and through the right channel. So considering, I mean, let's analyze all this, especially in the backdrop of the Russia India meet, the bilateral meet, especially like it was the first bilateral meet by Indian Prime Minister after clinching its third term. So all eyeballs were there. So this definitely, if it happens, we'll try to understand what will be the deliverables. But to also understand whether this is like a damaging control, because we saw how Zelensky responded, we saw how West responded. So is it actually damage control to placate the West, or would it be like really substantive in terms of how the war is heading? But we'll get into the specifics. But I want to understand, I mean, a personal question for you, Geeta, because I was actually actually thinking that these reports, I read certain reports, and they were citing that diplomatic sources have claimed that this is likely to happen. Now, as a reporter, I had a very small stint, but I used to report on like social issues, and we used to go on the ground and develop a certain rapport with the sources, and then you get to know all the scoop. But considering your field, it's shrouded in secrecy. So how do you maintain that secrecy? Because of course, you can't reveal your sources, but even if there's like a slight slip up,
there can't be, because if there is, then it is a disaster for the source. And when we're told from a source that this is what is happening, or if we're getting a confirmation, or if we get to know from the country in question. So in our beat, the sources are not just government of India, because we cover various countries. There's so many missions, so many officers, diplomats who we're dealing with, and then the countries in question. So if it's Ukraine, suppose this visit, it's not necessary that it would have come from New Delhi sources. Or for that matter, even Ukrainian embassy in New Delhi. It could have come from Ukraine, from Kyiv. Someone from there, who would want to speak and said, well, your prime minister is coming. So it can happen from anywhere. But the fact is that, and because it's security-wise a very sensitive issue, that a leader is traveling, most of the visits, if you see in the past also, all the tall leaders, world leaders who've traveled to Ukraine especially, their dates and their travel details were kept a secret because of security reasons. So over here also, when we were discussing, we said, okay, I've heard this, that prime minister is going to come. So we are seeking confirmation from both sides. They said security reasons, we can't give dates out. But then we, off the record from some other sources, also got to know that it's 23rd of August. But officially, nobody's going to confirm the date yet. So we'll have to wait for the announcement. Again, because it's very sensitive, and because it has to do with Kyiv. But we have seen a bit of, increased aggression from the Russian side, although we do know that if Modi's traveling over there, the Russians are not going to, will ensure that there's no untoward incident that takes place.
That's true. But the diplomats also, how do they know? Like, there would be certain diplomats only, right? Not all diplomats would be having access to a sensitive information like this. Or is it like, how does that work?
So if it's to do with prime minister's travel, it would be confined to the PMO, certain officers in the PMO, the topmost officers in MEA, to do with that country.
Okay.
A concerned officer dealing with the country, and then the embassy. And the headquarters of the country. So they're all in touch, but only a few top-notch officers are in touch.
Right.
So it does not percolate down till the very last minute, till there is a decision, and they also keep quiet for security reasons. And then there'll be an entire bunch of diplomats from India who will travel as an advance team to Kyiv to see exactly what they want and how they want things played out, that this is where PM is going to land from here. He's going to take these many, walk here, sit here, do this. So everything is planned to the T. And for that, an advance team goes. Then where will he stay or, secure the entire area? Then there's an advanced security team that goes to ensure that the entire area is sanitized. Then there is an entire team that travels with the Prime Minister. So there are
multiple levels of security. Okay. So
multiple layers of security and planning.
Yeah.
So there's an advanced team, then there's a team that stays there, there's a team that comes back, and then there are those who travel with the Prime Minister. So multiple layers, and meanwhile, continuously the embassy does a lot of work. Ensuring that whatever has been asked by the headquarters is delivered.
Yeah. Right. So coming to what we are talking about this time is the probable visit to Kyiv. So let's also recall what happened during Modi's trip to Russia. Because like I said, it irked US and Ukraine.
No, but there was a preamble to that also.
Okay.
He had gone for the G7 summit.
Oh yes.
And he did meet Zelensky over there. Yeah. And he did hug Zelensky over there too.
Yeah.
And they spoke about the Russia-Ukraine war. After which he went for his first bilateral. So which is what makes it interesting, because G7 was a multilateral a visit.
Yeah, like on the sidelines
by the Prime Minister. But also his visit to Italy was not a bilateral visit after taking office. After taking office, he had already accepted the invitation, so he went to Italy. And normally Indian Prime Ministers go to the South Asian neighborhood.
Yeah, okay.
As a gesture.
As a gesture.
Usually Prime Ministers go to the neighborhood, the South Asian region, to show how important the neighborhood really is. But this time around, after coming back from Italy, he chose Russia as the first country for a bilateral visit after assuming office for the third time. So that was significant, right? So, but then he did not go meeting Putin without having met Zelensky in advance. But Zelensky he met on the sidelines. So I suppose Russia must have had its own concerns. And so he then went visiting Russia. The hug and the engagement and the bonhomie certainly did not go down well with Ukraine. So they actually, questioned India on how can you engage a war criminal, so on and so forth. But look at the messaging there, because there's also a lot of pressure from the West. West is also your own ally and partner. America was watching the visit, and they actually, in so many words, said it was a disappointment. State Department briefing.
Yeah,
and they also said that we are looking at what is being done. If it is to bring about peace, it's okay. If it's about your own self-interests, then we are not okay.
And let's not forget that during his visit, a Russian missile strike happened on a hospital in Kyiv that resulted in at least
so the timing of it couldn't
casualties.
Have been worse.
Yeah,
because he landed there and one of the worst attacks took place on a hospital, and children were fatally injured in the the bombing caused fatalities, which is just terrible timing. And so the outrage was far greater from the West also. In fact, we were talking to a few diplomats earlier. They were not very keen, and we're talking about, foreign diplomats over here. They were not very keen that he even go. Like, they were asking, is this the right time? We know you have to do a Russia visit, but then you'll be doing a BRICS summit too. So why have a bilateral right now? But I think India wanted to make a point over here, saying that while we engage you, we are not going to let go of Russia, and Russia needed that. So the visit took place. And while he was there, because of the pressure, look at the statements that Modi made. That's more significant. With Putin sitting over there, he's talking about how this is not an, again, era of war, and that, goes back to the diplomatic table, negotiating table, diplomacy is the only way forward. And Putin was sitting right there, and, that's the message he carried. So while there's a lot that can be read in terms of the hugs and so on and so forth, the fact that he spoke very, very sternly for and very clearly for peace is something that also cannot be amiss over here.
Definitely. But there were certain observers who were saying that the hug between Modi and Putin was like really, I mean, the optics were fantastic because this comes at a time when the entire West is, um, trying their hands to make Putin look like Kim Jong-un. And in that backdrop, Modi, like the largest democracy leader, is going and hugging that person. So that's like a very big message.
It is.
Right.
Well, it is.
So then why?
The Russian administration and Putin require legitimacy. And India provides them just that, because there's no other friend of Russia which is actually a democracy other than India.
Well, yeah.
None.
Yeah. So a validation coming from India is like, definitely a big thing.
China not.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much of a friend you'd say Pakistan really is.
I mean.
And not. So. And also India has a unique position, Anna. It's friends with Russia, but it's great friends and allies and strategic partners with the West as well. Over here also, there's a very important thing that happened. The US ambassador at one of the events went ahead and said, when the Russia visit happened, that there's no such thing as strategic autonomy. Something that Jaishankar has been talking about through and through, that, we exercise strategic autonomy, that whatever is in our interest, we'll do that. And he said there's no such thing as strategic autonomy when we're talking about wars. Because then, and he tried to make a point over there, not saying that you're either here or there. I mean, you decide how you want to. But then we'll have to realign how we look at you in terms of supporting each other with technology and defense. Because if you're friends there, if you're friends here, how do we trust our high-tech weapons in your hands? And if you're not going to come support us now, why would you expect us to come support you when you're in trouble? So that's an important point, right?
That is a very important
point. But he made that, he said that. And India was not very happy about it. That not just State Department saying that we're disappointed. The ambassador in New Delhi said that there's no such thing as strategic autonomy. So massive messaging from Washington, D.C.
Exactly, because
also comes at a time when they're on election mode. Anna. So and he's a political appointee. So he will weigh his. They're weighing their options and seeing whether if it bodes well for them to be seen as a weak country succumbing to the wishes of a country like India.
Yeah. So then let's assess the timing that US is going to probably see a change in leadership. So what has happened with the Russia visit, that it has irked them for obvious reasons. So you think that this is an attempt by Prime Minister Modi, if it happens, to placate the West and just like, maintain that equilibrium phase that it always wants to maintain.
What? You're saying the statement was a way, or the visit itself?
The visit, no, I'm saying if this visit happens to
Ukraine.
the
Ukraine visit.
Right, yeah.
So, interesting. If the Ukraine visit happens, it might not just be to placate the West, but it could be where they're steering the conversation. If you see Americans, they have always, now they've started saying that if this is what you want to do, then play the role of a mediator. Then become the peacemaker. So we don't know what Prime Minister Modi's messaging would be over there. It certainly will be come to the negotiating table. Now, at the negotiating table, Anna, things have now changed. It's no longer, Ukraine does not have that diplomatic space today to say Russia should move back. because Russia is not going to move back. So, what's the give and take that's going to really happen for Ukraine to be able to continue not just that their sovereignty is honored, but continue being able to be independent, that the territorial integrity is honored, whatever the area that's left.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that they should confine themselves south of the Dnieper, which is what a lot of people say. For those who don't understand, Ukraine has a major river, the Dnieper River, and the east side of south and east side of the Dnieper is where the Russians, because Russia's on this side, have already taken. It's the north and the west that still is not completely under Russian control, and that's where Ukraine is. So they're saying that in all probability this Dnieper will become a natural boundary, which would be unacceptable to Ukraine. But then what's the deal over here? How far is Ukraine going to go and willing to negotiate? Now, people will say, why are you even saying that? It makes no sense. It's their land. The Russians are sitting on it. They should just move back. But practically speaking right now, Russia is not going to do that. In fact, Crimea, which they have made their own, Donetsk, Luhansk, the areas which were considered independent territories because they sought independence from Ukraine and did not want to be a part of Ukraine. So all the anti-Ukraine forces supported by Russia managed to have this entire space, right? And it's within Donetsk only that you have Mariupol. But those areas were not under Russian control. So Donetsk also, the Donbas region, it's part of the Donbas region. So the Donbas region, parts of it were still under Ukrainian control, and Mariupol was the bordering port city, which was still there. And so when Russia decided that now we will hold a referendum and take this and let them decide whether they want to be part of Russia or not. And they became part of Russia.
Russia only, yeah.
So now, with them having declared that these are parts of Russian territory, the negotiation will have to happen on whether Ukraine will recognize that or not.
Right, yeah.
In all probability, if Ukraine is willing to recognize that, then we'll see whether if Russia is willing to, move back.
Move back, yeah.
At least till the Donbas region. But then you have Zaporizhia, which has a nuclear plant.
Yeah.
Will they move out of Zaporizhia nuclear power plant?
Right.
So there are a lot of questions.
Yeah.
At the most, what Prime Minister Modi can do over there is go as a peacemaker, say that, well, it is time that you sit behind a table rather than behind the tank or a gun or any such weapon, because that's not really, finding solutions to the problem that exists.
Yeah, I mean, it's already been suggesting that if Prime Minister goes, then it will serve the global good, if he could actually find
I think they would the West would want him to go and engage Ukraine like he did Russia.
But
just to show that, okay, he's not sided completely with Russia.
Right.
But,
But that's what I'm saying, that, okay, it's been 2 years since the war. You got multiple chances, right? I mean, there was G20 where there was a joint statement, but you know how it panned out. And there was no solution. I mean, India, one of the fence sitters, one of the neutral countries in the entire war. But
there is a reason why Putin was not attending and is not attending these multilateral fora.
We know that. Yes, we have discussed that. But I'm saying that now what? Like, what more can India offer? I mean, we just say that India can be a good mediator. India said, India has the guts to say its friend, look right into Russia's eyes and, say that this is not the era of war. So India has the guts. But then that friend also has to pay heed to what the other friend is saying. If Prime Minister Modi is saying that this is not the era of war, did the war stop?
But I think over here, then Russia will also exercise strategic autonomy, and so would Ukraine, and they decide exactly how they want to, whether it's in their strategic interest or not.
Right. Yeah.
Right now, it is not in India's interest, so to say, to go all out even if he's in Ukraine, all out and speak the language of the West, because you have China, a China factor that stares you in the eye, Anna. And for India, if India wishes to adopt strategic autonomy, India cannot ignore the fact that Russia, China are sitting together today. So we would not want to rile Russia. Not that Russia would be riled by this. I'm sure there's an understanding. I'm sure conversations have already happened that, well, I've done this, so I'll have to do this. Please try to understand. Like the calls went and said that, we've done this, but please try to understand. We'll continue taking oil, but with the West, these are our problems. And they were very glad that India stood by Russia. In fact, Russian economy would have been in a shambles if not for all the support from India and China.
Yeah.
So over here for India, China is a very big factor. So you would not want to go and alienate Russia at this point in time. Not that it's going to happen with this visit, because like I said, the conversations must have taken place that, I've done this, I need to go do this as well. Let's see when the visit takes place, because what we are given to understand is that in all likelihood, it's going to be on the 23rd of August.
Right. So just to close this thought about strategic autonomy, to me, like, we have also tried to sort of comprehend that this kind of visit to Ukraine that follows a visit to Moscow, it risks further confirming the notion that I feel that India doesn't have anything substantial in terms of, its support for Ukraine's war against Russia. And if that turns out to be true, then the visit itself will be it will seem like a token gesture by New Delhi to placate the West, which had criticized us after our visit to Russia. So also, like I said, the fact that for 2 years since the war broke out, Modi has supposedly told Putin on 2 to 3 occasions that this is not the era of war. And after all that, they exchanged a warm hug. And in a joint statement, in fact, from the Moscow visit, the language around the war also changed. It changed to the conflict around Ukraine rather than in Ukraine. So it seems now that Putin is somehow also convinced has convinced us that this is the era of war. And we are somehow fine with it, because New Delhi did not criticize Russia for its war during this bilateral summit. And meanwhile, New Delhi is also blocking Indian companies from providing construction, medical devices, and telecom equipment to Ukraine. And it's supposedly afraid of, drawing criticism from Russia. So coming back to this strategic autonomy factor, how do you see this? That shouldn't that also apply to our relationship with Russia if we are indeed for strategic autonomy? I mean, sure, meet with, of course, President Putin, and build on that relationship. But if our outreach to Ukraine is also predicated on the limits imposed by our relationship with Russia, how is that then strategic autonomy, Geeta?
That is what is strategic autonomy, Anna. Because if it does not serve your interests to serve a country, why would you do that? At this point in time, if it does not serve, strategic autonomy is that I take the autonomous decision to who I want to serve, how I want to serve, who I want to take from, and how I want to take from. I'm not going to support Ukraine and not support Russia just because the West wants it. I will hold that autonomy and say strategically, does it help India? And if you see the larger picture, it doesn't help India, because forget about everything else, and we've discussed this in the past as well. When the war broke out, at that very point, at that very juncture, our entire defense system was dependent on Russia. We are only making shifts to Western weapon systems in, parts. And even there, a lot of it has not come in. A whole lot of the agreements that we've signed do not have 100% technology transfer, even with the United States of America, when Prime Minister was there on a state visit saying that, well, we are looking at technology transfer. That also is about 80-85% technology transfer. So when your entire defense system is aligned to Russia, you're thinking strategic autonomy for your strategic interests. But there is a larger story to it also. I can make it very basic and say this is the reason why. And yet nobody will say, okay, boss, we understand. Why? Because, you're so dependent on Russian hardware. But that's not the point. There has been a historical relationship. And over there, when, now India says that when we were fighting Pakistan, US went ahead and supported Pakistan and did not support India. Right. Russia came to India's rescue. So that historical perspective is also strategically thinking who helped and who will continue to stand by us. Then there's a third part of that entire strategic autonomy that you exercise, whether if it's good for you or not. If you go ahead and side with US and the West right now, then you will have a China problem. So strategically, even there, you're thinking for your country and saying, well, this is not the point in time where I would want to have enemies. In fact, if anything, India is quite uniquely positioned where it is friends with Russia and the West. And despite all the Russia-Ukraine, challenges that the region has seen, and it's not new. It's been happening for decades now, right? We are only hearing about it because now they have a full-scale war between the two states. But you didn't hear of it in 2014 when Crimea was taken by Russia, or when the government in Ukraine, which was pro-Russia, was ousted. Right. The government was ousted, and then you had a pro-West government in place. And since then, they've had pro-West governments. So nobody was looking at it then, that what happened, what really played out over there for the government to change and for a pro-West government to come. And now pro-Russian politicians are opposition leaders, but they are there. Just because there's a war, everybody's rallying behind the government, but and they're not happy about it. But they were pro-Russia. So for India is uniquely positioned to engage Russia, to engage the West, and has had historical ties with Ukraine, irrespective of what the relationship of the two countries have been. Our students have been going to Russia, but also a lot of them to Ukraine. In fact, maybe in numbers, you'd have a lot of them. And if you would have included Crimea as erstwhile Ukraine, a lot more in Ukraine, studying medicine, studying engineering, some even studying some vocational, subjects. So, So why would India do away with this strategic autonomy, which today is being questioned by the West?
I think that explains.
Maybe they'd say there's no such thing as strategic autonomy when they're in times of war. But India has not got. So India is still not placed in a manner where you can completely depend on the West for your defense and military capabilities. So then what happens? What happens then? So it's a difficult position, but for Prime Minister Modi, he's trying to balance things with Russia and the West. This visit cannot be looked at only because the Ukrainians were upset, but they were very upset. They sent notes. They expressed their displeasure to New Delhi. They were very unhappy about the hug.
I got it. But just quickly, if Prime Minister Modi visits Kyiv, then wouldn't that upset Russia? I mean,
I told you, Russia and India have a better understanding. They said, go do. Modi went to G7. G7 was all about anti-Russia rhetoric. Moscow was not perturbed with Modi being there. There's an understanding, which is why I say, look at the understanding here and look at the understanding on the other side. It still feels like a fledgling. Internally, they of course understand, but they all have to make public statements. Also remember, US is on election mode right now. Maybe diplomats aren't, but politicians are. And they run the country. And they run these departments too, whether if it's State Department or the White House.
That's true.
So, strong statements came from US rather than from Moscow. Also, Moscow is on the back foot, with the war and everything. So they're being careful.
And they're like, now, anyway, Vladimir Putin has cleansed its third term. So, so, so let's wind it up. And what if this doesn't happen? Like after so much of
That's all right.
Okay.
That's all right.
But then,
It was rumored to have happened.
okay.
If it goes through, it goes through. If it doesn't, it
No, but then
doesn't.
the Ukrainians and the West would still be, I mean, they would be upset, right? So that stays the same, or there would be other
No,
efforts?
they would be upset, but right now I don't think that it will not happen. The dates might change, you never know, but it would be apt for him to go on the occasion of the National Day, because then it looks like an invitation, and so he just, is going for that, rather than make it a standalone bilateral visit with no other purpose but to just visit Ukraine.
Yeah, right.
So this makes more sense than any other day.
So, Geeta, as we conclude, like I started the conversation with the domestic turmoil. So, because we are discussing, prime ministers' tours and visits, and there's a particular narrative that we see here, which the opposition raises, that when will our prime minister visit Manipur? Now, we don't have any answer to that question, but I just want to understand, because like it's been a year, more than a year, that Manipur has been burning. The civil strife has not come to a halt right now between the Kukis and the Meiteis. But looking at the domestic turmoil, like, you think, is the opposition right in pointing out the lapses at a time when such foreign trips are planned? Like, when this news came in, Jairam Ramesh, he was the one who pointed this out, that Prime Minister Modi is going to. These are the points. These are the times when the opposition also picks up on these narratives. That okay.
See, let me flip that question around. If they were in the opposition, and if there was a strife such as this, the opposition would have questioned, why is the PM not visiting? And the PM has always visited strife-torn areas, or engaged with those who are affected, or gone to a hospital to visit those who have been injured. Yeah. It has always happened.
Right.
It's a norm. So if the opposition is asking this, it's true. Anna, when I was in the US for the PM's state visit, his first state visit to the US last June.
Yeah, we did that, yeah.
And we had this entire Indian diaspora and all of that. They came, they were very happy. They said, we're very proud that the Indian Prime Minister, and there was this Meiti, not Kuki, okay? Meiti, Manipuri professor, who was there. And she said, I'm very happy, but, Manipur is burning. And she said that the Prime Minister should pay heed to what's happening there also. This is from a professor thousands and thousands of miles apart.
Yeah.
In the United States of America.
Yeah.
Urging the Prime Minister. So yes, country has a right to ask. Country has a right to, opposition has a right to ask, and country also. People can ask their Prime Minister. He's an elected member. You ask. You be decent about it, but you ask. You ask these questions because they're important. You ought to know whether if, and the other response can also be, well, this is a law and order situation. The Home Minister is handling it, so on and so forth. But to rarely speak about it, to not say enough to stop the violence is something that, anybody can question. So yes, I think turmoils aside, wars aside, if you can be a peacemaker for the world, you ought to be one for your home as well.
I think it's actually very clear, like the way you say, although you say that it is the norm, like if you flip the question and
if they were in the opposition, they always did it when they were in the opposition. They always used to say, PM kab aayenge? PM kab jayenge?
But then that's also a thing that okay, the opposition is questioning that, but then that's, if you remove the opposition, that's also a question that the citizens are.
Which is what I said, that people ought to ask these questions. It's not about the opposition alone. Right. People ought to ask these, and they are asking, and they're right in asking, they're right in demanding. You can give whatever reason you want to. The government can actually come out and say the security situation is such that it does not permit Prime Minister's visit.
Yeah.
Whatever your reason is.
Yeah.
Or that, Home Minister is handling it, so the Prime Minister is not intervening right now, but he's completely apprised of the situation.
Yeah.
But does not mean that the Janta, the public, cannot ask. They have a right to ask.
Right, definitely, yeah. So I think we'll put an end to our conversation, Geeta. Thank you so much. I think if this happens, this visit, we'll take a look at what kind of deliverables were met, and we could also have like a proper, understanding of
it actually places India as a peacemaker. Like, what is India going to deliver in this?
Yes.
You met
yes.
Zelensky on the sidelines of G7. Then you went to Moscow for a bilateral. Now you're going to Ukraine. What is it? What is the political capital that you're going to invest?
Very right. Yeah.
Because you cannot just keep traveling without investing political capital. It takes a lot. It actually takes a lot to invest one's political capital, a country's political capital, in becoming a peacemaker.
Wow.
So is India willing to do that?
Wow. Yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah.
What are the deliverables for India here?
Yeah. Is it beyond optics?
Yeah.
Or we are actually going to have like,
what can India do?
What can India do?
What is the message that India is going to take from the West, from Russia, from India? In terms of perspective.
Yeah.
So let's see what happens.
Yeah. Let's see, and we'll closely track Prime Minister's visit that is likely to happen on 24th of August. So keep listening to Geeta's World, keep watching, keep commenting, and keep sharing in your feedback. We're happy to, welcome your thoughts and insights on our podcast. So thank you so much, and we'll be back next week.